Hello everybody, welcome to Advanced Digital Cinematography Masterclass Week 2. My name is Tom Strnad. Thanks again for joining us. This is a multi-part 4-week workshop. So, this is every Thursday, 11 o'clock. So if you were joining us last week, make sure you keep joining us. It does go for all 4 parts. If you can't watch us live, or if you're stuck on a schedule, you can rewatch these. So this link is available for you to enjoy after, and we'll also be posting these on our YouTube channel when the course is done. So week 1, we had a great session looking at focus pulling. So rack focusing, as it's called, and combining pans and tilts, and then moving the camera with the focus pull as well. So really great kind of tool to start to add movement, but also movement within the depth of the frame. I think that's really important. It's not just the camera movements that we're looking at. Advanced cinematography, we start to look at the movement within the frame. And so today what I want to look at is, we're taking that kind of original idea of 3-point lighting and thinking about how we can kind of deconstruct 3-point lighting into, 3 points, but maybe not with lights. Maybe the points are fabrics or bounce or black, like opaque materials to reduce lighting as well. So that could be an interesting idea. So that's what we're going to look at, is exploring lighting with reflections and shadows. So oftentimes, some of the nicest lighting or the most beautiful lighting in cinematography that we'll see if you're watching a film comes down to lighting with shadows. And it's really through the shadows that we can be creating, some really beautiful imagery in terms of, what we can get out of our lighting exploration. So that's the really fun part about it. So as we go through this, if you have any kind of questions, or you want to talk about equipment, you can email me, tom@tbmcs.ca. Just put that in the chat there. So feel free to email me, tom@tbmcs.ca. Check out our website, www.tbmcs.ca. You get more information on what's available, our programs and equipment. So the equipment I'm demoing with, like the reflector, the newer LED lights, and the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera, these are all available through our library partners. So that's the great thing, is that what I'm showcasing and showing are pieces of equipment that you can take out. So from the Blue Downs Public Library, Wasabi Beach Public Library, they have these exact pieces of equipment, and that's really exciting. The Collingwood Public Library has a Canon 6D. That's a great DSLR photography camera that can shoot really beautiful video. And so that could still be applied to anything we're doing in the cinematography courses. So you can check that out. Now, also the concepts are, just as easily can be achieved through phones, iPads, iPhones, smartphones. So the same idea, you could be shooting with your phone and using lights. You could be using, existing light bulbs, lamps, things like white bed sheets can reflect. So there's a lot of DIY concepts and what can be done. And we're going to be doing that in upcoming master classes, just that kind of, DIY cinematography ideas of what you can just use with your existing equipment, and how to kind of, enhance your visuals with things that you might just have at home. So that'll be really exciting in the future. We're going to look at that as well. Okay, so exploring lighting with reflections and shadows. What does this mean? So here's what we're going to look at today. And then we're going to do just a bunch of demos and take things apart and bring them back together and kind of see where we go with different ideas. So 3-point lighting, we're going to review what that means. And just as a topic and as a general basis, it's a great, simple, best practice in terms of lighting. And it's more of a way to think about lighting and think about the essence points of where lighting comes from, but it's not necessarily a rule that you have to follow strictly to what that means. But I think 3-point lighting gives you a great guideline of how you can achieve your lighting sources and how you can put a scene together quite quickly. But what we want to do today is we're going to look at using bounce and redirected light. And that could be our second or third point of lighting. So while we could use all 3, like lights, artificial, continuous lighting or existing, home or studio lighting that you already have, like wall mounted or table. Those are 3 points, but the points can also be bouncing back from another point. So your fill light can be bounced from the key light and so on. And then we're going to look at flags and black materials. So, we're going to take the same reflector and make it into what's called a flag. So basically using the opacity of a flag, of the reflector, to make it into what's called a flag, which is to block light. And then we start to create shadows. So, and that's kind of leads us into the final thing, is lighting with shadows. And I think that's the really interesting thing, is that, at the end of the day, it's, if everything's just really bright, you're just in big bright light, and it's just kind of even illumination. There's nothing really that beautiful about it. It's not really natural. So blasting a bunch of light and just having someone's kind of face flat isn't very interesting. And if you go back to painting, if you look at galleries or anything like that, and you can see what's possible to do. So so let's think about that and those kinds of topics and what we can do. So how can you do that idea, lighting with shadows? How do you make it work, and how do we go from there? So once we get into these best practices of lighting with shadows, 3-point lighting, 1-point lighting, we're going to call it 1-point lighting that can extend into 3 and 2 and 3 points. We start to control our lighting, and that's really the cool part, is to be able to control our lighting in terms of shaping it. And that's what we want to try to do, is how do we shape lighting? How do we make it, that more interesting? And lighting is really the presence of shadows. If we're just flat, it's hard to really make it, the most interesting image. So go back to, think about your favorite, as I was just mentioning before, so think about your favorite paintings, or artists. And so if you look back and you think about, okay, painting also involves light sources and shadows. So, as a painter, you're not just making something that's flat. You're looking at the dark areas, the bright areas, and using lights and shadows to enhance the image, to make certain things more highlighted, less highlighted, and so on. So it's, if we start to think of lighting as the presence of shadows, and how many shadows we have, how little shadow we have, where the shadows are, placing the shadows, we start to think of it as contouring rather than just adding light for light, but we're adding light to create those shadows, if you kind of reverse think it. So it's a little bit of a different thought process, but it's a really cool, creative way to think about lighting. So yeah, okay, so let's look at 3-point lighting. That'll be our first subject here. So what I've set up is, I have this the setup here. Sorry, there's just a bit of a pole in the middle here of the poor gnome's face. But I have this, this is going to be used to hold a reflector after, so we can bounce some light. So let me just clear that. So here's the guy, here's a gnome. This is using traditional 3-point lighting. But you can see, by having a fill on the right side, there's definitely shadows around his face, and we're getting some nice contouring in terms of the shadows and what it looks like. So, what does that mean? So here's kind of the wide shot of my studio setup, and it gets pretty busy. So it's a squished kind of a narrower space, but again, if it's a little bit bigger, we would have a little bit more space. So we have there's a key light here. This comes down here 45 degrees. I have it kind of coming up and down, and it lights the side of the gnome, right? So we got the key here. I have a fill on another 45 degrees, right? So 2 angle lights from the 2 sides. And then up there is the backlight that shines down and kind of puts that rim light on the gnome. What does that look like? Let's break it down. So let's take this. So again, this is a review. You've probably heard me talk about the 3-point lighting before. So here's what it looks like. Let's break it down, and then we'll look at how we can do this differently now that we've done 3-point lighting. So first, I'm gonna I'm gonna turn all of these lights off. Let me just get this stand out of the way here. So that's the fill is off. Oops, as my gnome gets a little bit shaken up there. Okay, and so this is just the key light. Okay, so there's still like window light, ambient light. So you can see it's pretty dark. So this is really extreme shadows. We don't really have any kind of major light source. There is a bit of a background light that's lighting up the back room there. There's a bit of this front light that's used to light me when I talk to you guys on the camera. So it's not total darkness, but you can see it's really, really dark. So if I start with adding the key, this is like our strongest light, right? So now we have this light that comes from this side, right? But I'm gonna end up with a lot of shadows over here, and I have a lot of shadows back here, right? And it's not too bad. So if we look at kind of where can we place this, I can move it around a little bit. I can angle it, we can angle it in a different ways. So that's kind of off, that's kind of more on, right? And so on. So this is a good 45 degrees, a little bit higher. So the direction is kind of up this way, and you can see it shines right there. So that's our key light, one light, a lot of shadow right here, right? So that's the 3-point lighting, point 1. Point 2, let's put on our fill light. So now we got our fill light. So you can see, again, on, off. So you're just filling in the shadows, but it's not totally removing them. It's still keeping the idea that that side's darker, but it's literally filling it in. Now, this can be controlled, so I can make it brighter. I can bring it down. So, I can make it, let's make it like 60%, which is basically 60% of the other light. It's probably more like 50% in the actual true. So you can see, it's a slightly different angle. It's a little bit further away than the key light, but see, we're filling in the shadows. So that's our fill light, literally filling in the shadows from the key light. Now our backlight is really going to be what's going to shape the back here. So let's turn that one on now. So again, that's just right behind here. Turn that on, turn that off, turn that on, turn that off. So you can see it illuminates the background, but it is just giving a little bit of a highlight on the gnome's back of the head. See, like that? See how the hat is off, and it lights up that hat in the back here. So it's really lighting up right here and a little bit back here. All right, so this is our traditional 3-point lighting. Key, fill, backlight. And you can see them as they come together in a symphony, as an ensemble of the 3 lights together. It creates that cool 3-point lighting technique. It's not too complicated. It works well, but it does require 3 lights versus just using 1 light. Okay? So now what we're going to do is let's consider some other ways to do this. So we're going to look at bounced and redirected light and working with that. So I guess another way too is we can say, well, I have windows in the studio here. So I could open up a window and blast more light to help fill the gnome, right? But in this case, he's on the side of the wall. So I have no window option. What we can get and use is we have these reflectors. So we can use these reflectors like this. They're kind of the photo reflector idea. And they call them 5-in-1. So they open up and they have this nice disc shape. So we have white on one side, and we have gold on this side. And this will reflect the light from the key back onto our gnome. So I can just put this on and then reflect without using the fill light at all, right? So let's do that. So let's say now we're going to bring it back down to the key and the backlight, and we're going to redirect those two lights into a fill situation. So by redirecting that, this reflector is capturing the light, and I'm redirecting it back at the subject just by placing it in the line of the lights. Okay, so what is that? Let's see this at work. What does that look like at work? So here's our shot. This is, again, the fill is off, right? We still have the backlight, so now we're at 2-point lighting. And I'm going to use the white side of the reflector first, then we'll look at the gold side. And here it is. So now that's without, and now I'm going to add a little bit. Look at that. I can just with this white, I'm redirecting and bouncing the light. That's without. And this is redirecting our key light and backlight into a fill light. So you don't even need a fill light. You can literally use this reflector to bounce and redirect your light back on like so. Okay, so without. So that's the white side. Now we also have that warm side. We have that golden side, and this can add a different color temperature. So now look at that. Now we're adding this like golden glow. It's almost like he's at a fireplace, right? Very different kind of feel, but it's an interesting way to add a lot of light. So you can see right away. Now take this, and we're going to be doing an exterior session during this masterclass. So think of this now. So if we're doing this exterior with sunlight, how can we bring back some sunlight? Because the sunlight is going to be 1 point, right? And you see that we usually need at least 2 points to try to fill in a little bit of the shadow unless we want something really dark and dramatic. So the sunlight could be bounced back. So think of this reflector. If we're outside, we can use the same technique to bounce back some sunlight into someone's face. So instead of their right side of the face or left side of their face, camera right, being really dark and in shadows, I can fill it in with this bounce reflector. That's a really cool, great way to bring in a little bit of extra light that way, right? So that's the white, right? Or I can add in this golden hue, like so, right? So the sunlight, I can actually add this like golden hue to someone if I really want that warmth accentuated from the sunlight, right? So we got rid of a point, 2-point lighting, but we're adding a bounced or redirected light as a second or third point into this lighting configuration, right? So now let's look at let's look at what happens if I turn off I can turn off our key light, and let's just look at, just using the backlight. So I'm going to turn off the key light. So I just got to go over here. I'm going to turn the key light off here. Right, so now now our character is what's called backlit. What does that look like? It looks like this. So again, he's just backlit. Looks cool, right? And it's, really moody and nice. We got that rim light, that backlight only. But again, we're missing a lot of light on him. So imagine again, if that's like a window or the sunlight, and you get that backlighting effect. So I'm sure we've all seen that. Someone's sitting in front of a window, you try to take a picture of them, and it kind of shows up like this. So let's try and redirect it. Same idea. We're going to take this light, and we can redirect some. Look at that. Just by filling it in a little bit, we're making it a lot better, right? So total darkness, I'm just using the backlight. I'm just filling in a little bit of light here. It's pretty soft, and it looks quite beautiful. We still have a lot of shadow. But we're able to fill in that light just from the backlight. So if that was sunlight, look how effective effectively I can redirect that backlight right onto the face. So let's look at the same thing. I'm going to just take the golden side and do that as well, right? So really cool. Now we got that kind of tungsten look, like he's in, warmth redirection. But again, we're lighting without light. We're redirecting one light, making it into two lights, or even three lights in this case. It's almost acting as a little bit of a key and a little bit of a fill. And we can try different angles. So I can go over here from the front. I can play with, where does this go? I can try to bounce it down, right? So the angles you can play with are infinite in a way. And it's just about figuring out, how to do that. So I can kind of bounce from under, and look at that. Like it's really cool how I'm able to get so much light from one light back at him just by redirecting it. And it gives a really soft look, right? And it's a bit darker, but this is how we start to look at it with shadows, redirecting light. Sometimes you don't need a lot of lights. You can use one really strong light, like that backlight, to help increase the look with having that kind of a shadow mood and that shadow kind of area. Okay, so that takes us through bounce and redirected. So I think that's the key thing to think about again, is that we can use this for sunlight. We can make one light into two or three lights just by redirecting the lights and where they are. So I think that's a really great concept, and let's remember that for if you're doing exteriors, if you're doing stuff in front of windows, how important, you can quickly use these kind of reflector discs. And again, they're available. We have these at the Wasaga Beach Public Library and Blue Mountains Public Library. You can take these out. You can just take them out if you have a library card there. Also, they're pretty cost effective now. You can buy these. I've seen them for as little as $25, different stores up to like $50 or so. So not a heavy investment. If you think about the universality of using this outside with sun, using it with lights and so on, it could work really, really well to make that work. Okay, so now let's look at the idea here. We can open this disc. So that's the reflection side. So it is a 5-in-1. The other thing we can do is we can use it on its own. And this is like a diffusion kind of idea. This can diffuse the light to make it less powerful if we can't dim it. So again, great for sunlight, and this can be kind of redirecting or using materials to soften light. We have some softbox ideas we've talked about in the past. So let's look at putting this in front of one of the lights as well. So let's put the key light back on. So I'm just going to turn that one back on. Let's turn that on like that. Okay, there we go. And let's just look at what happens if I'm kind of on the wrong side here. Let me just step around here. If we put this in front of that light, what will that look like? See, so that's without, and that's with. So it really softens it down. So it makes it, less intense. So you can see that intensity, and again, softening it down. So it's a great technique to always consider is, can you soften things down? So again, now we got our fill light. I'm going to bring this in a little bit closer. So what happens with the fill light? So this is with the softening diffusion, with and without. Really, really subtle, but it is just softening it down a little bit. So it's a great tool to just bring down what could be sometimes a harsher light into a less harsh light. Okay, so you can flip this reflector around, and this is the great thing. And it becomes essentially a silver and a black, silver black versus gold white. So we're gonna just flip this around, And silver is a great kind of reflector as well. It just has, so you can see, so now it's silver on one side and black on the other side. And black gets us into something called negative fill, which is reducing light completely to make sure it's not filling in our subject at all. And again, this is in our quest to explore lighting with shadows, how we could achieve such things. So I'm just going to put this disc on. Let's get this disc on here. And then we're going to zip it up. So again, 5 in 1, because we have gold, white, silver, black, and opaque, and diffusing disc, right? So that's kind of our realm of all of them. Okay, and I zip this guy up. Spin it around so I can close it up. There we go. Okay, so we got the silver and the black. So now we're going to look at using the black material, but I also want to demo the silver just so we can see that idea of the fill with silver light. So the silver light, you can see the silver gives us a really powerful bounce. So I'm going to just turn off the key light again. So now we just have that backlight, a little bit of our existing fill light. Look at what this can do. It makes it a really strong redirection, right? Really puts a key, looks identical to what was there. So that's without, that's just with a fill. And here's the redirection of the backlight. Really strong. So it's putting such an equal bounce on it. It's just an amazing redirection. So I really love that. I think that works really, really well. Okay, so now I'm going to just turn this one back on. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to look at using the black materials to block lights out, right? And what we can do with that. So if I feel, sometimes if I go, okay, you know, there's a lot of light coming in the front of him, so that's with, and that's without. It's super, super subtle, but I'm blocking some light out from the room. So this can give you a more controlled atmosphere to make sure you don't have any windows or any kind of other light. So now this is the whole idea of just blocking light. So this is negative, and you can see the black, just bring it in and see the black doesn't bounce anything onto the subject at all. So by putting this on, this makes sure that if, let's say there's a white wall behind, right? So let's turn this off and I'll just give you guys an idea. So there's no fill. This is it without. And this is a negative fill. So it's just making sure that the room is not bouncing anything back. So what does that mean? It's if we look at, you know, what happens, I have darker walls here. But what happens if we have, a bit of a brighter, so this would be if I had a white wall. This is what the room would look like if I had a white wall. So imagine there's a white wall beside our subject, and when you're lighting it, we're getting all this bounce. So what do? We put up this black material. So it removes the wall's bounce. This isn't a light. I just have a piece of white foam core as if it was a white painted wall, right? And by putting up the black, I'm negating the white wall and just allowing my two lights to do their work, and I'm negating that fill of the wall, right? So that it can really work that way. Okay, so that's the one thing. But the walls aren't white, so that's not happening here. But if you were working in a room that had a lot of white walls, that's important. Okay, so now what we can also do is we can work with shaping the light. So we can put this reflector in the background here. So I'm going to just play with this backlight that's coming up here, right? And now what we can do is we can do what's called cutting. So I'm going to try and just go on the side here so you don't see me as much. Okay, so what we're going to do is now we're going to play with what's called cutting. Okay, so now we have no backlight at all. And now we have a little bit. We have a little bit more. We have a little bit more, and you can see it goes to the top. But maybe I decide that I only want that light at the top. Or I only want it on one side. So see how we can cut across until I'm happy with the reflection on the light. So I can just essentially have a backlight that's just on half the character and play with how much of it is there and where that reflection is on the hat. So I'm just sliding the black opaque across the light, blocking the light, improving and reducing the light. Okay, so that's how we can shape our backlight beyond just the light the way it is. So that you could just be holding that, you could like tape it, you can put it on another stand, right? So there's a few ways to do that. So doing it that way. So now let's look at, can we shape this this key light here too? So here we go. We're going to totally block it out, and now I'm going to move it across. See, so we can decide, okay, how much light and where that light starts and stops. So we might say, hey, we only want this much. And now you can see how we're starting to really light with the shadows. So we're cutting the light, we're blocking light. Where does it start? Where does it stop? And alternatively, I'm going to go from the bottom here as well. Don't want to block our camera lens here. So that's the light open. And then here's me, I start to cut it. So I'm bringing some shadow onto the character. So totally open, and I'm bringing some shadow. So I want it to look realistic, like he's in, there's some shadow environment here. Right, so totally open and into the shadow a little bit. So that's pretty cool. That gives us a great idea of, okay, what can we do to, play with the light, and we can, and I'm using this big reflector, so you can buy black foam core, you can buy, a piece of duvetine, like a felt type material. Anything that you can use can be used to, bring down the overall light amount. Right, so this, I'm just putting this above, and so there's a white ceiling here, so this is without, and now I'm putting the black on top of him to make sure there's no bounce light on the top. Okay, and now we're going to play with, again, cutting in. So, maybe I want just a little bit of less light on the hat. So we can really start to carve. Look at that, right? It's really interesting. So he's, I just want to put his face into this darkness. That's how we can start to carve out the light and the shadows and, do different things. So maybe, I just want his body. Look at that, right? So we got that backlight, we cover his eyes, really mysterious, moody character. So we can create these kinds of moods. And same thing goes, maybe I want his whole face, but I want his clothing to be in darkness. I just want his face lit. right? So that's the combo. So really, really interesting. So now let's look at, we can add our fill. So we're gonna keep the 3-point lighting, and now we're just gonna kind of, what we're doing with it. So that's the 3 points. We got that fill on this side here. So now we can really, again, add a little bit of, like where do we want some shadow to fall? On the side here, a little bit on his face. Put a bit more like that, right? A lot of fun of what we can do. Now let's look with the fill light. And, just cutting down to his face, right? He's a little bit less dark, but we're reducing our key light on his face, but keeping the fill light there. So again, shaping those shadows. Right, so there's a little bit on the side there, but I'm covering his left, right, and so on. You can see just bringing it in and out until I'm happy with that. So that is the beauty of using what's called cutting, and using our like negative fill to create different shadow types and shadow imagery within that. You can use your hand, to put different kinds of things on it. So anything's possible to play with that. At the same time, I'm using, there's a silver on the other side, so it is kind of reflecting back. We can also reflect, light down, right? So that's kind of off and on. And we can also reflect from the other side, right? So if I really want to bring in that kind of reflection back at him, right? I'm just in here just so you can see kind of what I'm doing, but I'm reflecting that key light back here. You can see how strong that reflection can be, right? So that's our overview here. So we can do our 3-point lighting. We can just do 1-point lighting and redirect some existing lights to make that work, right? And we can do those different types of elements. And so we're balancing and redirecting. We can do traditional 3-point lighting, or we can just work with one light. We can work with one window, and then we can balance and redirect light to create a backlight that also becomes a fill light. So we use silver for the maximum redirection. White is a softer redirection, and the golden adds that golden hue. So silver is a pretty neutral redirection. It doesn't add any color to the existing light. It's like a mirror reflection. So that's the redirection. So we can make the reflector a 2nd or 3rd point in our 3-point lighting. Then we can use those flags, the other side, so the black side of it, to make the flags an opaque cutting or flagging, right? By using the black side. It's not reflective, right? So it's a great source to cut with and play with. So you can quickly block light out, you can redirect light, and do different things and achieve different things with that idea. So now, what's really great, I think, if you can, using any kind of device you have, why not try these techniques out? You can use existing materials. So even if you have a black t-shirt, that could become your flag, right? And to cut with. And it's really fun because you can just a little bit, you can see lights don't have to just be the way they are. Lights can be shaped. So we see that in kind of in animation lighting, or modeling. If you're clay modeling, things like that, you're shaping things. So think of lighting as the same idea. You can shape things. Oftentimes independent filmmaking, we don't have a lot of time to light with shadows or to do that extra little work. But when we do, you can get some really cool results in terms of what it looks like. So again, just blocking off a little bit of the fill, or blocking off, or adding a lot more redirect here. Right, so look how much brighter that is. Right, versus, let's bring that in. Again, that's with the bright silver, non-silver, just using the fill light. So I can be more powerful by redirecting this backlight than using just the fill light at its present state, right? So remember the power of the bounce and the redirection. I think that's a really good takeaway in terms of what's possible and how we can make all these things happen and doable. Now, in terms of what were our settings here, so I know that people always like to ask. So we're using f 5.6, 400 ISO, and I stated the white balance of 5600 degrees Kelvin, and that is to ensure all of these lights are daylight balanced. So we're stating that. So I'm at an ISO 400. It's a little bit probably underexposing a little bit. So here, if I wanted to go open to 4 or 3.5, that would probably be fine too. So here it is, just a little bit. I always like to go a little bit darker just so we kind of see that crispness of the shadows. So you can even underexpose. I can even go to, let's say if we went to 8, let's just have a look at what that looks like. Still pretty nice. We got a good image, and we can see that crisp outline of the backlight in that, right? So it's a little bit on the underexposing side maybe, but I like that. That would be a good look. So that's it. I would go between 5.6 and 8 in this scenario, and ISO of 400 is what we have here. So 400, 5600 degrees Kelvin, and 5.6 is what we were demoing with today. So those are our tech specs of what we did. So yeah, that really takes us through. So that's our concept of that's the 3-point lighting back to where it was. But you can see how we were able to shape and craft through shadows and redirecting light and bouncing it to make it all work in this whole studio scenario. So that's it for our workshop this week. Next week we are aiming to do exterior, but we have 2 more weeks, so we have to be weather dependent. So I want to try and take us to some of the exterior concepts with some more advanced exterior concepts in cinematography and what we can do with that. We might just work with an indoor setting, but we're going to look a little bit on that. If you have specific subjects or topics you want me to address, I can still do that as well. We have a couple more weeks left, so just send me an email and I'd be happy to try to work that into what we're doing. So yeah, you can rewatch these. This exact link, you can rewatch it right when we're done. Provide any kind of feedback to me, and I encourage you, go and test out this concept. So go back, look at your 3-point lighting, do that, and then try and achieve 3-point lighting with one light and redirecting it to create 3 points to fill in the shadows and so on. And then look at using 1 or 2 lights and using some sort of an opaque material to cut and shape the light to add more shadows, to light with shadows. And then you're on your way to really getting into these, beautiful imagery that you can shape with your shadows and that you can help tell the story. Where are the shadows? What does it mean? If someone's face is in shadows, there's something maybe menacing. If someone's clothing's in shadows, or if, let's say, they're holding a phone and that's the brightest part, that's leading the audience into, hey, that's an important part of the story. So I need to pay attention to that phone. So it could all be used by highlighting certain areas. You can lead the audience into your storytelling as well. So always remember why are you doing that too? Not just to look, hey, that's beautiful, but what are we trying to do? Are we helping the character? And sometimes a really brightly illuminated character is trying to show us something in the story. It's not just that it's not bad lighting, it's just that person's brighter, and then maybe the villain is darker and in shadows because they're trying to show good versus evil. That kind of storytelling technique as well, right? So remember that it's not all just about, you have to have shadows, but it's now how to make shadows, and the thing to consider is why. Why am I going to make those shadows? Why am I using that technique? So yeah, that takes us through today's session. Just want to thank all our partners in this project for making this happen. The Canada Council for the Arts, and then we have our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, Wasaga Beach Public Library, and please check out the equipment. We have access to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K at the Blue Mountains and Wasaga Beach Public Library branches. Send me an email if you have any questions about the equipment access, and you need to get onto that. Do the proficiency test at our website, then I get an email with the results. You can contact me if you have questions about doing that proficiency. Love to see you guys taking the equipment out and trying these techniques when you can. So that would be really fantastic. So please try those techniques out. That's your assignment for this week, moving into week 3. And then next week we'll be back and we'll be looking at advanced exterior lighting techniques will be next week's session. So I will see you guys then. Have a great rest of the day and take care. All the best.